Hey gamers, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to tackle speed painting the British 10th Hussars. These iconic troops with their bright red Shakos, or Shakos depending on your perspective, can look stunning on the tabletop and remind us of the adventures of Lord Flashman. Now gather your gear and I'm going to show you my secret to get them battle ready fast. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to be reminded when I upload new content. First things first, let's talk about priming. A good primer is essential to ensure that the paint adheres well and provides a solid base for the colours. I've already applied the black primer. Black I've chosen because it helps with shadows, and then later on we'll build up the colours and highlight to really make them pop out. However, you could also use a white or a grey primer if that's your preference, but black works for me and it's best for the shadowy darker recesses, whilst a white or grey would be useful if you're painting bright colours. But find what works for you and go for that. Then it's time to gather your paints for whichever regiment you're going for. Just use your source material to guide you. Any tools that you're going to need, clippers, knives, glue, and get some paintbrushes. And now we get to the fun bit, applying the colours. So first we're going to do the tunics, and for that I'm using Game Colour Night Blue. So for my method, what we do is we do all of the base colours first, and then we'll build up from there. So start off with the uniform, so the tunic, the trousers, horse, muskets, anything which is sort of big and blocky to start with, and just give them their foundation colours. Next up we got the trousers, and so for these guys we're using Army Painter Uniform Grey. So for these miniatures, we are using acrylic paints, as I find they're very easy to use, easy to clean up, and very readily available. I will be doing some tutorials on using oils at some point in the future, but for this time, these are all acrylics. And now at this point, don't worry about being too precise, just focus on getting an even coat over the entire uniform, or horse, or whatever it is. That's your main focus here. So for the horses, we're going to be using Game Colour Leather Brown. I just use the one colour for most of my horses just because it's easy and quick, and after all we're trying for speed painting, although you could very easily use blacks, dark browns, whatever you want, just give them a bit of variety. It's entirely up to you. My advice when you're painting smaller miniatures is to use slightly lighter colours, just because that way by the time you've applied washes and they're on the tabletop they will stand out a bit better. Maybe it's not quite as historically accurate, but it just makes them stand out a bit better. But again, everyone has their own opinions on that. Let me know down in the comments below what you prefer. Do you like your miniatures to stand out a little bit better, or would you rather them to be completely historically accurate? As you can see here, this final horse I actually ran out of the brown on the palette, so I actually had a bit of white which I mixed with the residue, and that's why this horse is a slightly different shade. So next up we've got the horse furniture, so we've got the blankets and the sheepskins, etc. So we're going to be using Game Colour Blazing Orange and Dead White and Game Colour Black. And then these ones, they work quite nicely, they do contrast very nicely and they stand out, which is really good. A nice interesting colour scheme. So let me know in the comments below, what's your favourite colour scheme or uniform scheme? I would say probably overall, one of my favourites is probably the Polish Lancers from the French. There's so many interesting uniforms, but that's probably my number one. So let me know what yours is. So now we get to the fun bit, the unique part to this regiment specifically, and that's their red Shakos. So we're using System 3 Crimson for that. So although this isn't a miniature paint, it's more of a reasonable quality sort of artist paint. But it works well. I enjoy using it. It's got good pigmentation. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't say don't use these sort of paints for your miniatures. Have an experiment. Now it's time to do the skin. So I'm using Game Colour Bone White. When you're painting your guys, most of them would probably have been wearing gloves back in the day, probably white gloves. Although as things get lost and deteriorate, especially in the field, some of them will be just barehanded. So it's kind of up to you how you want to go with that. Do you want to paint flesh for their hands, or do you want to paint gloves for their hands? And just go accordingly. So we're using Game Colour Silver, and we're using that on all of the swords, the scabbards, horse bits, anything that's metal. I'm just using this colour for. It's nice, it's quick, it's easy, it does the trick. Next up we're going to use Model Colour Chocolate Brown, which is quite a dark brown, and we're using that for the carbines on the miniatures. Although the British didn't tend to use them that often, they did still get issued carbines, so yep, they're on the miniature, we got to paint them. To add depth and shading, we're going to use a wash. I'm using a dark brown wash and apply it generously over the entire miniature. This wash will settle into the recesses, creating shadows and then highlighting the details. So it's definitely worth doing. Washes are great for adding that depth quickly without needing complex layering techniques, so I wouldn't skip this step if I were you. So once the wash has dried, it's time to go back in and do the leather work, the collar and the cuffs. In this case we're going to be using Game Colour Black for these bits. So I'm using a fine detail brush here just so I can get the reins without going all over the horse itself. Also obviously with the uniform, the cuffs and the collars are quite small, so I use a fine detail brush on those also. Next up we got the crossbelts. So again, using white, use a very fine detail brush and just take your time. Support the miniature as best you can, support your painting hand as best you can, and yeah, just take your time to get those belts done. And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake, but don't worry too much about it. You can always go back in and clean up, but it's easy if you don't have to. So for our final colour we're using Game Colour Bright Bronze, and we're using this on the badges and the buckles, but also on these guys their braiding was a yellowy gold colour, so I've gone in and done all of the braids in that gold, also on some of the cuffs and on the facing of his tunic as well. So it's a little bit intricate, but just bear with it. Now finally it's going to be time to add some finishing touches, so cut them out, put them on their bases. Then you're going to add your flock or sand, preferably some little things like grass tufts or clump foliage, sticks, twigs, rocks, whatever makes your miniatures really look cool. And there you have it guys, a quick and easy method to speed paint your British troops. In this case, hussars with Shakos. These chaps took me probably about an hour to do. If you were doing 2 or 3 bases of them, it might take an extra 15 minutes, so not too bad really, especially when I was stopping and starting a bit for the filming. So as I've said before in other videos, these techniques will help you get your army ready for the tabletop fast without sacrificing too much in quality. Speed painting is all about finding that right balance between quality and efficiency, and I feel with these tips now you'll have an army painted and ready to battle in no time. But thanks for watching guys. If you found the video helpful, make sure to like, subscribe and hit that bell icon for more wargaming tips and tutorials. Also leave a comment below as to what you'd like to see in the future, and also what campaign we should do next. Anyway, until next time guys, happy painting and happy gaming.